Okay, so anyways, let's do a recap. So this week you guys did have three videos that, or about three videos. You had three lessons that you had to read through today, or I guess this week. So the first one here was on changes in genetics. And so just if I can give you just a really quick summary of the changes in genetics notes. So scientists alter the genes of many different organisms to improve their use to some people in society. For example, if you want to look at, say, certain crops for the food that we eat, it is really important that they are resistant to certain chemicals that may prevent weeds from growing inside those crops. So biotechnology is a scientific term that we can use to describe the modification of living things that really improve, it could be any aspect of our lives. It could be in terms of the medicine, agriculture, or even engineering. We looked at three specific types of biotechnology. The first one was selective breeding, where you would select the two parents that that have some sort of desired trait, and hopefully when they mate, they would produce that desired trait as well. So for example, you might be looking at livestock, or even say maybe a certain type of breed of dog or a horse, that sort of thing. The next one that we looked at was artificial reproductive technology, and this is where you artificially joined a male and a female gamete, or those sex cells. And within that, we also looked at two different types. There was the artificial insemination. That's where you would take a male sperm and then insert it directly into the female. And then the in vitro fertilization is where you would actually take the female and male gamete, and you would join them together, and where I guess where they'd be fertilized and they'd be growing in a petri dish, and then they could then be inserted back into the female, or even into a different female as well. The third kind of we looked at was genetic engineering, and this is where you're directly altering the DNA of that type or that specific organism. So there's risks, as there are with just about anything. So with genetic engineering, so an example is that there could be a risk of deadly potential disease that could wipe out the entire species. And so there are some ways that we can have some accidental changes to our DNA, and that could be through things like carcinogens, which are those toxic cancer-causing chemicals, or say overexposure to the UV rays. So that was what you should have read on Monday. So on Tuesday, you should have read about genetic conditions. So a genetic condition is a disease or disorder that is caused by damaged or faulty DNA. They are typically caused by recessive alleles. And so recessive just means that they're kind of hidden in the background, unless if that's the only trait that it is, I guess, that exists in that organism. So they only show if that's the only trait that that organism carries. So male infertility is a condition caused by mutation that prevents the male from producing offspring. So obviously that can't be passed down to its offspring because it can't produce any. Well, we looked at that in the Kahoot. For the sex-linked genetic conditions, those are linked to your X and Y chromosomes. Those are your chromosomes that determine the gender of the offspring. So some examples of sex-linked genetic conditions would include hemophilia, color blindness, and baldness. So in terms of the chromosomes that make up females and males, females have two X chromosomes, so to be a double X, and males would have one X and one Y. So because males only have one of each chromosome, they're actually more likely to inherit the sex-linked genetic disorders, just because they only have the one chromosome. And a recessive, say if they were to inherit a recessive trait, well, that's the only thing that it's going to show. There's no possible second chance for a dominant trait to come and bear the recessive trait. And our last one, this one here you guys would have done yesterday. So we actually looked at puberty and the human reproductive system. In this recap and in the Kahoot, as I said yesterday, I'm actually not able to I don't think I'm actually allowed to put on any diagrams of the male and female reproductive systems, just because of the explicit graphics, and I actually got flagged on my Kahoot as being inappropriate. So I decided to leave it out of the out of this recap as well, just because it is being put on YouTube. But They are important. We aren't having tests just because we're doing the online, sort of supplemental learning. But otherwise, I would have actually tested you on like actually labeling those diagrams. So it is important to understand the male and female reproductive system. Each little piece that I got you to label in those diagrams, they all play an important role in both the bladder functions and even reproduction. So, okay, but anyways, let's do a quick recap of that one. So we first began talking about what intersex state is. So that is a condition where a person has an atypical combination of male and female physical features, which could include the genitalia and their chromosomes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're hermaphrodites. Or if you guys remember what hermaphrodites are, those are organisms that can produce both male and female gametes. And then we moved into what puberty actually is. So puberty is the time when hormones begin the changes that make our bodies produce the mature gametes. And it's kind of that phase that we go through that leads us up to, I guess, us or, the organism being fully matured. And so we reach our adult stage at the end of puberty. And so with that, within puberty, part of the major stuff that's happening is that you're getting all these hormones being released in your body. And so hormones are molecules that our bodies produce that give instructions to cells, telling them to respond in certain ways. So very, kind of almost like, that sounds very similar to DNA, but definitely a little bit different. One is more of the hormones are more of a chemical in your body. All right, so next we talked about gonads. So the gonads is a general term for the reproductive organs. So for females, these are your ovaries, and for males, that is your testes. So females are born with all of their eggs when they are born, but males, on the other hand, their sperm can die every day. And so with that, they can produce new sperm every day, which I believe the number that we had in our notes was, I believe it was 200 million sperm every day, which is a crazy number. Mm-hmm. All right, so then male anatomy. So just kind of talking about like what happens with your sperm and kind of how it gets out of the male body. So sperm is made in the testes, so the male gonads, and then it moves through your epididymis to finish maturing. So even then, it's not even, if sperm isn't even fully made in the testes, it still has to go through a maturing process, which is in your epididymis. So then it travels through your vas deferens, and then it goes out through the urethra. And so with males, your urethra actually has two functions. It will release the sperm or your semen, and it also is a way for the urine to get out of your body as well. And so this is different for females. So for females, the eggs begin in the follicle inside of those ovaries. So the follicle is like kind of like a sac that protects the ovaries and allows the eggs to develop and kind of nurtures it. And then so at ovulation, the egg is released. And so what happens is that follicle basically ruptures, and then the egg is released, and then it travels through your fallopian tubes towards the uterus. And so if your egg is not fertilized, the egg will disintegrate and leave the body through the process of, then that's ovulation. And then as a result of ovulation, as we learned yesterday, that is a result of ovulation is menstruation, which is the bleeding that occurs after your egg has disintegrated and left the body. Okay, so that was a big review of the week. I will stop recording here.